I invited you, Ozark, but Ozark has not accepted. So, like, maybe Ozark's too cool. He's on. Oh, he's showing up. Up. I'm going to get everything going. So, welcome to Breeders Roundtable. We do this every single week and we talk about different topics that are relevant to breeders, keepers, reptile owners. This week was requested last week. We had a request to talk about genetics. And while we're primarily focusing on ball pythons here, that doesn't mean that it doesn't apply to other species in the hobby or species in general, because a lot of the terminology that we use with ball pythons can be utilized with other species, up to and including humans. So I figure let's just do introductions, maybe what you breed, your business name, your name, and what you breed. So I'm Stacy with Midgard Morphs, and we breed ball pythons. Eventually we'll be doing some BCC boas, but not just yet.
I'm Kevin with Ozark Reptiles, and I do mainly ball pythons, but we are going to move into crested geckos, leopard geckos, eventually, not right away.
Cool, Kev. Hey, what's up? I'm Phil with Constrictly Business. I focus on green tree pythons. I have three currently. Brazilian rainbow boas. I have boy and two girls on that as well. And about 30 ball pythons. Just stay focused on a few projects with them. And that's about it as far as breeding. I've got some other geckos, but no real plans to breed them. They're just pets.
Awesome.
This is Brandon and Emily with Cheever Exotics. We breed ball pythons, crested geckos, and might be doing some expanding here soon.
Nice.
Very cool. And TKO.
Hi, my name's Graham. I'm with TKO Exotics. Currently, our focus is on bearded dragons, crested geckos, and gargoyle geckos, and we're hoping to expand into some other species here soon as well.
Cool.
Right on.
Awesome. And
Hello.
it's R&R was just joining us.
Yeah.
Are you here?
Oh,
Okay.
my name is Rebecca. I'm with R&R Reptiles. I breed. Oh gosh. Okay. I breed Colombian rainbow boas, Jamaican boas, rough scale pythons, green tree pythons, and a slew of geckos.
And a partridge in a pear tree.
Yeah.
Okay.
She
so-
didn't say ball pythons, mute her.
Sorry, I used to breed ball
Gotta get the
pythons.
boot.
Not anymore.
Safely
So-
get a copperhead out of my yard.
You just make friends with no. Getting
Really
copperheads
long
out of your
sticks.
yard.
Leave it-
Truthful answer. We would probably, truthfully, we'd probably leave it in our yard and just avoid it.
Yeah.
But,
Leave it alone. It'll go away.
yeah.
So diamonds.
But if you are very concerned about it, get on Facebook, look up some snake removal groups in your area. There's going to be someone that will come out and help you out with that. Reptile people tend to like to come out and do a little bit of herping and remove venomous snakes when they can. Anyways, so the topic this week was on genetics, and we kind of wanted to start with like baseline definitions, but also talk about how that really applies in the hobby, why having some of this information is important. We had a lot of people last week who were wanting to dive into morphs and stuff like that, which is all well and good. But truthfully, if we sit up here showing everyone a yellow belly for an hour, I don't know if they're going to gain anything useful out of that versus going out and holding a yellow belly in person and seeing it in their own hands. So I really want, and I'm using yellow belly as an example. So really wanted to kind of dive into why this information is important. What does it mean? So, I mean, let's just start out very simple. Recessive versus dominant. Anyone want to kind of dive into that and just get the conversation rolling?
Well, a dominant trait is one you just need a single parent to pass on to the offspring, right?
Mm-hmm.
It's not guaranteed unless that parent is a super. So if that parent has two copies of, say, Orange Dream, then its babies will, by definition, have one copy of Orange Dream. If the parent has its own just single copy of Orange Dream, the babies are kind of a crapshoot. Will they get it? Will they not? But that applies to a lot of things I think that are really common in the pet market, and they're really becoming in vogue again in breeding in the higher end stuff. People are chasing all those recessives, and now they're like, you know what? 2 or 3 codoms with 1 recessive is really a great looking snake. And so I feel like that's getting more love again lately. But I mean, that's the best way I could think of it without giving a bunch of, examples, Enchi, this, that, and the other. But
No, I mean, we've been focused a lot on recessive projects, right? And
Oh,
Somebody has a.
That's my ringtone.
I was gonna say somebody's got a soundboard. This is going to be interesting tonight.
I'm like, that's gonna get real
Yeah, I was
wild.
about to ask who has the soundboard.
Right?
that's my notifications. I got a text. I turned it down.
Whoever has the soundboard is in charge for the evening.
That's right.
But yeah, so we've been focused pretty heavily on recessives, but I was talking with Cheever today too, and we are looking to pick up some more dominant genes to add into our recessive projects, because cool, we have them, but now what? So, Shane's in charge because they have a soundboard. Perfect. So I do think mixing those two in together can really be beneficial, because recessives are a lot of fun to work, right? And it's cool when you hit them. So for going into like definitions of recessives require 2 copies of the gene for it to be visual. So to make it this is not going to be simple. I'm sorry. But we have these things called alleles. And so each gene is basically, and I'm not a scientist, guys. But 2 copies on each one. So if you have, say, a super form of pastel, I'm just going to put here.
Guys,
Pastel's the dominant gene. A super form, you would have 2 copies. Every baby they have, they get 1 copy. They can't pass on 2 copies. They only pass on 1. So anytime they're on this allele together, it's only going to pass on 1, right? With recessive and with pastel, you can have just 1 because pastel's dominant, and you can still be a visual pastel. However, if you're looking at, say, someone shout out a recessive gene for me that's not clown.
albino.
Albino. Beautiful. If you get
Speaking
a snake,
of which, I just checked on. I was going to get my albino girl out, and I've got albino eggs.
hell yes.
I'll deal with that in a little bit.
Okay. If you need to go deal with it, like, totally understand. So albino. If you only have 1 copy of a gene, 1 copy of albino, that albino will not show. However, you get a second copy, ta-da, visual albino. I know. It's simple and complicated at the same time. You do have to understand genetics a little bit if you're getting into breeding. But
there's also incomplete dominant as well.
yes. And so incomplete dominance or codoms, kind of what we, I feel like we argue a lot back and forth on whether or not it's called incomplete dominance or codoms in reptiles, but I feel like we use those fairly interchangeably as the general public, right? So whatever one
Either
you
or.
hear is still relevant. So with those incomplete dominants, that's where you're getting those super forms. Like you can have a super pastel. You can have a super black pastel. Like, wouldn't necessarily recommend it, but you can have it. It does exist.
Basically where both alleles are partially expressed.
Yes.
If that helps anyone understand.
Is normal a specific genetic? So normal is like your base morph. So yeah, I mean, if we're doing like a Punnett square, I would still write normal on there. Normal is still a genetic. It's just what we consider normal or wild type. What about allelic morphs?
Well, we did a whole thing on the spider, which has a whole allelic complex, and so does the bells. The bell has a allelic complex. Some allelics are safe to breed together, others are not.
Mm-hmm. So allelic basically is two completely separate morphs, right? Generally show up as completely separate. However, when you combine them and they both are combined into one animal, they show up on that same allele, which ends up creating something totally different than the two separate morphs. Like we talk about bells. Everyone loves bells. I mean, how many of you have jumped in and asked a lot of the people in here, do you have bells? Pretty common question, right? Bell is allelic. So that's two morphs blended together, creating something that looks completely different than those two morphs.
I've actually been. Oh, sorry.
Huh?
I saw Anthem had a good question.
Oh.
What's up, Anthem?
So how do you know what's dominant and what's recessive was the question.
Anyone want to take this one? Give your opinions on how you learn that.
At least with bearded dragons, certain morphs, both parents have to carry the genes. So if you're, for example, looking to create 0 bearded dragons, both the mother and the father have to have the 0 gene in them in order to produce any offspring that are visual. The babies may come out as a het, or they carry one of the alleles, but not enough to present or show. Now, when it comes to dominant genes, such as, again, I got to go with bearded dragons because it's what I know. The trans gene or the hypo gene in bearded dragons are both dominant. Only one of the parents has to have that gene, whether it's you're able to see it or you're not, in order for you to produce those babies.
And then what if we went a little bit like lower level even with that? And how do we get to the point of learning that? Because could we all agree that it is important if you're going to get into breeding to understand recessive versus dominant, allelic, all of that stuff? Doesn't matter what you're breeding.
Sure.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Right? Because it helps to know what you're going to produce, right? So how do we get to that point? So a lot of the people coming in have been people who are just getting into breeding or are just even exploring the idea of breeding eventually, right? And they want to start off on the right foot. I think anyone that's in this hobby, if someone's going to breed, we're like, we want you to make sure you have all of the information going in before you get started in these projects, right? But how do they start learning that?
Morph Market is a really good place for that.
Mm-hmm.
The Morph Market has a gene calculator where you can basically input the genetics, and then it'll tell you what you're going to get from your certain pairings. You can insert, let's say you get a ball python that has a lot of different hets. You can input another ball python that has a bunch of different hats that you don't know what it's going to make if you combine the two, and then it'll list essentially what you can get, and it'll include a bunch of different options and their percentages of your likelihood to get those options as well.
I like to say that this is a hobby with homework. So like, as cool as it is to be like, today I bought a bell python, or today I bought a bearded dragon, or today I bought whatever species you're looking to buy, right? You're probably not going to know every morph and every dominant and every recessive that day. So when you go out and you pick up your first ball python, I think my first was actually a normal. I mean, that was back when I was a kid, but now as an adult, my first was a fire yellow belly, right? I didn't know anything about it. I thought it was a cool snake. I knew the breeder told me it was a fire yellow belly, right? But I couldn't have told you, was that dominant, was that recessive, was that anything. Also, I'm super into the eggs that are happening right now, and I might just ADHD over onto these eggs. What was the pairing, Ozark?
Albino to albino.
Albino to albino. So all albinos?
All albinos.
We should have done that as a question for everyone.
Yeah, there you go. Guess the egg. What's the genes?
Yeah.
Well, also, I think it's important too is you might get that you don't know the genetics behind it. I think that's important to mention too, because sometimes you might pair it to something to see what's in that snake and what genetics pop up into in the offspring. Mm-hmm. So, like, for example, a friend of mine had gotten a ball python, and she was told that it was a certain slew of morphs, of things, het and visual. And she ended up pairing it to something in relation to what it ended up having. And she got a bunch of random babies that she had no idea what they were. And that's the cool thing about morphs, is that she got an animal that she didn't know what it had, and she was able to pair it to something and ended up telling her and it ended up telling her what that snake had in it. And that's the great thing about morphs, not only in ball pythons, but other species as well.
Yeah.
It's a good way to break it down and prove out what genetics it's actually carrying.
Yeah.
You could have a 6-gene visual snake, and you can only ID 3 of them.
Correct, yeah.
Just because it turns into a mess sometimes, depending on the gene combo.
Exactly.
And I mean, that is a big thing. We're all like stacking genes. We talk about stacked ball pythons or stacked animals, right? You end up with so much in one animal.
It's good to have if you can ID it and know what it is.
Yeah. Yeah. So having those babies come out and being able to separate some of those genes out a little bit is going to help you a lot with that adult snake. Because sometimes there's just stuff that you're like, huh, yeah, I couldn't tell that was there.
Yep, looks cool.
Yeah. No, this is a cool snake. I'm going to list it just like that. My favorite one is when people just list them as weird looking clown or weird this or that, right?
This still happens today, even with the bigwig breeders that are breeding over 1,000 females a season. They still hit stuff that they're like, what is that? It still happens. There's still new genes coming out too.
Yep. And what are the reasons for that? So ball pythons in particular, and I think there's quite a lot of reptile species about this, like this, but once again, I am not an expert on all species. I'm not going to pretend to be. So there's some breeders of different species in here. Maybe they can speak on it. Are highly polymorphic, right? So we see different things get expressed, and we see new morphs develop over time. So sometimes people will use the term like dinker project, where they don't know what it is, but they're going to kind of work on it and breed it out and try to figure it out. Any of the species like you guys work with that are outside of ball pythons, are they similar to that? Do you run into some of those same phenomena?
Honestly, I think anything that's living, when you're working with genetics, it's all going to basically be the same. Mm-hmm. The way everything works and the way certain things will mix together and the outcomes, it's no different. It's a living animal. It's actual genetics.
And stuff evolves, stuff changes over time.
It's no different than people having kids, and everything could be fine and healthy, and then down the line, all of a sudden something pops up out of nowhere. What was that? Where'd it come from? It's genetics. It's the way it works. Things happen.
There's a couple of good questions.
I'm seeing them.
So shed test the only way to determine genetics? I would say no. The old-fashioned way is you prove it out. You use your eyes and your knowledge to say, well, this looks to be a yellow belly, which is really hard to determine, or this is asphalt. Oh, it's hard to determine. So a shed test can really answer that for sure. Before shed test, like, I don't know, 3 whole years ago, people would say, this looks kind of like that, and this looks kind of like that. I think this should pair, and then you see what the babies are. So that's a way to prove genetics. But also, there's people really good at the top levels of this game that can look at stuff and go, bam, 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 and list the genes just by looking at it. And I think that just comes with repetition and exposure and spending way too many hours on Morph Market looking through animals, whether you buy or not. The fact that you get into that filter and you figure it out, because what's awesome is there's a pink and a light orange and a light blue color bar pill shape on top of recessive, allelic, and dominant traits. And so you can kind of go, I thought chocolate was recessive, but it's blue, so it's like Enchi or Orange Dream. It's a codom. Whatever. I'm just grabbing random examples.
Yeah.
And so when you sit there and look at it enough, you can start to see with your own eyes the genetics. Like, let's just say, is this animal a normal or an enchi? Well, you could use some cues when you know them to look at that animal's pattern, its green eyes, and you know it's enchi. Could you put a shed test on it? Sure, but is it financially worth it to know if it's enchi? Oh God, no.
Right.
But
Good way to go.
there are ways to know through your own education, but shed test is really great, but only if you think the spending 40, 50, 90, 100 bucks on something is worth it, because the animal you're going to sell is, well, fuck, it's got to be worth more than 500 or $1,000 to even start to think like, oh, I'm going to drop 80 bucks to find out. Well, if you're selling a $200 animal, what's the point? There's a threshold, and knowledge is power, and knowing with your own eyes is the most cheapest and sometimes the most sure way to know what you're doing.
I think where shed testing kind of comes in, and we'll jump to the next question as well, but I think where it comes in more on like a breeder standpoint is less on verifying those dominant genes and more on verifying the pos hets.
Just found out.
Because so like we have a pairing, we have some eggs about to come from a clown head ultramel bred to a spot nose head ultramel, right? We might get some visual ultramels. We're going to get a lot of pos het ultramels in that. When it comes to selling those babies, it'll be up to me to decide, is it worth it for me to shed test all of these to prove that they're het clown head ultramel, or is it going to be better for me to just sell them as pos hets and let the owners determine that, right? And so the reason that I would say using shed tests in that situation would be, do you want to raise up a baby for a couple of years only to find out that it doesn't actually carry the genetic that you want? So those are the benefits to it. But do I think that you need to use it for every dominant gene out there? Probably not.
Yeah, and I'm not sure if you want to kind of explain how you end up getting like pos hets and then different percentage hets, because I think a lot of people are like, oh, well, how come I'm getting a snake that's 60% het? Like, how did that happen? You know what I mean?
Or are you doing like a het to a het, visual to, like, say, like a visual ultramel to a visual clown? One visual to a het makes a big difference.
Okay,
Shed
so
test could be beneficial, but it's not worth it. Spider's going to show, or spider's not going to show. Like,
Yeah.
Just like a dominant or an incomplete, it either passes or it doesn't.
I'll give you an example of it. What I did a shed test on recently. I have a male who's triple het. Okay, so he was 100% het. What it was, he does, where is he at? He's 100% clown, 100% desert ghost, meaning he had parents that were visual. This kind of pairs into what Rebecca brought up. The parents were visual, the baby didn't hit visual. So the 100% clown, 100% desert ghost, and it was a 66% VPI. I bought this snake for $150 from a very reputable breeder, TKO Exotics out of Rhode Island. So he knows his stuff. I sent a shed into Charlie, tested VPI. Lo and behold, it was 100% VPI. So now I have a triple het male, desert ghost, clown, VPI. That snake was bought for $150. Now it's worth $1,500 as it sits. And let's not forget, it makes $30,000 babies on the market right now. It makes $30,000 babies on the market right now.
I can go look up those genetics on Morph Market and come back with the price of that visual.
Yeah.
Triple het male, $1,500. I bought him for $150 because his 66%. It was iffy. It was iffy. And D&D's, they're great. They identified what they could. They were honest about the sale. Charlie did a shed test, and boom! Now I just made that snake make 10 times more valuable and a lot more exciting for my.
I think I heard him say he's sending me one. I'm kidding.
Right. So like those are the situations where. So for you, that ended up being a great deal as a buyer. For the breeder, from a breeder's perspective, should that breeder have shed tested before? They would have made more money if they did. But by not, then they didn't have to spend the money for the shed test. No risk to them up front. They sold an animal that ended up being better. And now the customer is incredibly happy with what they got from them. And I'm sure their review is 5 stars.
Yeah,
All day
I
long.
bet they are happy.
Yeah, Seth at D&D Exotics. That guy's got one of the most awesome set of pages on Morph Market. You go to him as a store, look at. I mean, he's got like 15 pages at any given time, and dude
Yeah.
just got fire. I would just buy like 90% of what he puts for sale. That guy makes. He's got some really cool projects. That dude is kind of under the radar, but has some killer animals.
So when you hit those $30,000 snakes, don't forget us little people.
Hey, I got 5 boys and like 8 or 9 girls in that project, man. This has been a year in the making, assembling the Avengers. This is going to be epic eventually, one day, maybe before I die.
Yeah. So all of these projects take a long time, but that's going to be fucking killer. So,
Yeah.
so going back to like what 100% het, 66% and 50% het means. So 100% het means guaranteed that animal carries 1 copy of the whatever morph we're talking about. I'm gonna grab
What I just showed. The albino to albinos,
Oops.
100% albinos.
But those are visuals, right?
The white
Mhm.
egg.
No, albinos recessive.
But your albinos that you bred were both visual albinos, right?
Yes, both visuals. Yes,
Okay, so no matter what, you're getting visuals there.
yes.
So there's no 100% het. That is a visual.
Yeah,
'cause
I'm
those
sorry.
are homozygous
I
there.
misunderstood what you said.
Yeah, sorry. I'm a little bit mumbly tonight too, so apologies. Like that's different from any other night, realistically. Okay, let's grab. Okay.
Now, when it comes to the shed testing, obviously it's becoming a pretty great tool in the U.S. Up here in Canada, unfortunately, I've not found any place to get such things done. Hopefully someday it comes up here. Until then, we've got to do things the old-fashioned way.
Can't you still use the U.S. based system? It's just mail-in sheds.
With the climate going on politically in the U.S., I'm hesitant to do a whole lot down there currently. I just actually sent my first order in the last 2 years to the U.S. just because I know the people. But yeah, you don't know when tariffs are going to be changing and whether or not the person's going to back out, or whether or not
Right.
because of the tariffs it's even worth venturing down that road.
I mean, I would, if you were going to look into shed testing, I would probably just shoot a message to Charlie and see what it would be for you in Canada and see if he can help. Like that's personally who I would reach out to. I would reach out to Charlie and just ask him and find out. Like, I don't know how shed testing is affected by tariffs, honestly.
You wouldn't think that there'd be much tariffs on a envelope with some shed in it. It'd be just like mailing a letter, be honest with you.
But
no, but where
truthfully,
you're
don't
paying
know.
for a service, they can tariff it.
Okay. Yeah, see, I hadn't thought about the shed testing. All the other stuff we've been well aware of, but shed testing, not so much. Is not something I've given thought to because it hasn't come up until in this exact moment.
It would have been really nice to have as a tool when I first got into breeding. My first pairing for bearded dragons, I got a lot of surprises out of that clutch.
Mhm.
I knew the breeder quite well that I got the animals from. And when I sent her pictures of the babies when they emerged from their eggs, all I got back was, what the hell?
Yeah.
I ended up with zeros and whiplets when I should not have gotten either one. There was hets in
Nice.
both parents that nobody was aware existed, and we're still not sure where they came from.
Oh.
Wow.
Okay, so
That's
I'm gonna
awesome,
ask this to right.
Oh, yeah,
I'm
it
going
made
to ask
my
this
day.
to the audience first, and then we can answer it up here if people are kind of stumped on it. But I want to give people like a chance to be able to participate and learn a little bit along the way. Okay, so what I'm holding here, this is an Enchi Desert Ghost Pied, right? I know he may not look super like a pied, but he is a pied. He's just very low white. So I am holding an Enchi Desert Ghost Pied.
Whoops! What's up, Tanya?
If I pair him to a normal, so I'm going to give a little bit of the answers. So Enchi is dominant, Desert Ghost is recessive, Pied is recessive. So if I pair an Enchi Desert Ghost Pied to a normal, what do I get? What are the options in babies?
Dun 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 dun.
Dun, 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 dun.
Ball
Enchi
pythons
is
just have so many more
dominant.
morphs.
Yes. So there is a super form of Enchi. He is not a super form. So we're keep more snakes. That is a good answer. Hopefully I get more snakes. It would be weird if I got a whole different species.
Everything would pop out double hit 100% because one parent's visual.
Mm-hmm.
But how many normals? How many just single gene inchies?
Yep.
It's not an exact number that you'd always hit, but it's a rough estimate.
They're north side set it, and she's a normal set or double head.
Yep. So the reason that we would call them 100% het, we know the babies are going to be het for Desert Ghost and het for Pied. The reason for that is the parent carries both of those genes visually. Now, if I then take one of those babies, so say we have a baby that is, let's just take Enchi out of the equation. It's 100% het for Desert Ghost and Pied, and I pair that to a normal. What am I going to get?
Who has the soundboard?
Right?
I'll just sing to you. Dun,
Yes, please
dun,
sing.
Dun, dun, dun,
Art,
no.
stop it.
50%
Okay.
hets. Okay. Thank you, Amanda. So I love that like people are kind of figuring that out. I think when you break it down and look at it as basic like math, you're basically dividing it back in half, right? So now we're at 50% hets.
North side.
So that would be the time that you go, is it worth shed testing to find out if it's actually het or not? Because 50% het means that, yes, it could carry that gene, 50% chance, but there's equal chance that it doesn't carry that gene at all.
Yep.
Now, what if we
What's up,
took those
Melissa?
100% hets? Go ahead, sorry.
Nothing. I was saying hi to Northside. I ain't seen him in a minute. I was happy to see him in the chat. Sorry. I didn't mean to distract. I'm sorry, teacher.
No, you're fine. Oh, yeah, we were going to wear, Ozark was going to wear a Catholic schoolgirl costume tonight. So, Ozark.
Yeah, we're not doing that.
With the Catholic schoolgirl outfit.
I got distracted. I got distracted by new egg babies.
Man,
So
we had the popcorn
Sorry.
ready and everything.
That
I
is
know
not
it was
an
gonna.
excuse. Listen, I wandered on to like National Park TikTok this week, and so now I'm expecting everyone to put on a show.
Well, you'll have to send me to either ASP or after school detention today. I'm sorry.
Oh,
Little
God.
Fox had a good question on your last example.
Yes, that's each baby.
Rich,
is
I said hi to you
50%, yes.
earlier, Rich. I saw your little picture there. I don't know. I saw the new handle last week. I keep up on you. I saw you, Rich.
Little Fox asked on your last example, is that each baby is 50% or 50% of the babies are hets? They're all 50% hets.
They'd all be 100% het
No,
because
on
the
the
parent is visual. Visual.
After
No, she would
on the second pairing after that.
on the
with
second
het.
pairing after that.
Oh, like het to a het?
Yeah,
Het to a normal.
het to a normal.
Oh,
Because
then
we're
yes.
just being wild now. We're just pairing hets to normals. And so
It's like 1994 all over again.
Yay!
Right?
Boy, what I wouldn't give to go back there.
Unless you get a Partho clutch.
If it survives.
Nick Rickman
That's a
had
whole
good
nother. That's a
question.
whole nother show right there. Parthos
Right?
are a whole nother show.
See what you
How do you
started
get
with?
the 66
See?
hat?
Okay,
Well,
so
actually, not unless you have the new gene phenomenon, which doubles the genetics.
Phenomenon. Do, 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 do.
Nice, you beat me to it, Phil.
Phenomenon.
I was like, I was about to ask if you were okay. I was like, what is happening?
Do, 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 do.
Okay, so now let's go
See
back
where
to
that
those
started.
100% het babies, right? We know that they carry Desert Ghost and Pied. They're 100% het. Now, what happens if we decide to pair 2 of those babies together? This is snake breeding. Sometimes that happens. We call it line breeding. Generally, you'd go to baby to a parent, but in this situation, for this example, we're going sibling to sibling. Okay? So, we have 100% het by 100% het. Now, what are we getting in the babies?
Well, if there's no visual, it's 66%, right? And then if you hit a visual, then you know it's a visual.
Mm-hmm.
So,
You'll get a percentage that are visual, and the rest that are not visual will be 66% het.
Better stated, sir. Better stated. There you go.
yeah.
The amount of visuals you can hit is all over the place.
Yeah, it's like if I do an albino to a het albino, it's like 25% per egg that I'll hit an albino. That's not a guarantee though. I could have a whole clutch that come out, even though I had a visual in the mix and hets, I could have a whole clutch come out that are just normal hets and just miss all the odds.
Yes, and sweet slithering, I'm not necessarily recommending that people pair siblings to siblings. I'm just saying that using this as an example, people can make it.
Yeah, and that's especially sensitive when it comes to mammals, especially higher up in the phylum when you get closer to. But when you're talking reptiles, birds, and things of that nature that are a lower, less complex animal, line breeding and inbreeding, you just can't carry it on. You can't keep doing it, but it's completely fine to put brother and sister together once, but maybe doing it 2 or 3 times, you may start to see deficits. But
exactly,
there's really nothing to frown upon when it comes to a bird, fish, reptile, because they don't have as complex of a DNA chain like a mammal, like a monkey or a human or a whale would. So it doesn't. Just because you had sex with your cousin doesn't mean you're going to have 3 eyes. But when it comes to snakes, you might, but you're not guaranteed. When it comes to snakes, there's really not a risk of that unless you inbreed over and over and over and over and over.
Yeah, and it is a fairly common thing. And people have opinions one way or another. I'm not here to argue anyone's opinions one way or another, truthfully. But is it pretty common that people will line breed snakes?
Yep.
Yeah. When you're going for triple recessive projects, I think you'd be pushing it to say that people aren't doing line breeding on triple recessive projects.
Yeah, you wouldn't get ahead. I mean,
Yeah.
it would be very expensive if you had a triple het awesome baby, and you're like, well, I got 2 of them, but I can't put them together. I'm gonna go get me another triple het baby.
Yeah.
So there goes $3,500 just for the sake of saying you didn't line breed. It would be very prohibitive.
Yeah. So, it's more common than people realize until they get into breeding, I think. So sometimes I think it's important to just explain that. Hey, bud. This is his first time actually being out on camera, and I'm not sure he's digging it, but he's doing okay. Good
Yeah,
job.
I wouldn't recommend, if you're going to put a sibling to sibling, I wouldn't recommend taking that clutch and putting another set of sibling to sibling together. But there's, like Phil said, there's nothing wrong with doing it once.
Yeah. Okay, so we've kind of established all of those things with the 66%, 100% het, 50% het. Now, why does it matter? Do you need to know this stuff if you get into breeding, realistically? And this is opinion-based here, so everyone
You don't have to know it, but it sure does help to guide your direction.
If you want to have snakes that you can sell, yes.
Mm-hmm. I think it's beneficial, and once again, this is my opinion on it, it's beneficial to really understand what you're getting yourself into. Because, I think also sometimes people will look at, they'll look at the morph market calculator and they'll go, I have 1 in 264 chances of hitting this really cool snake, right? And they're like, okay, that could happen. And I think sometimes when you really go down to the base level and understand what that really means, because 1 in 264 sounds like a lot, but it doesn't sound like quite as much as it really is. Like, so I think sometimes understanding, like, okay, if I'm working with a 66% het and I decide to breed it to prove it out and it doesn't prove out the first round, am I going to continue trying to breed this snake, trying to prove it out? Or am I going to accept that, okay, maybe it didn't prove? What are you doing?
Well, it depends on what way you want to line breed. If you do that route where you're going to run into a lot of problems, personally, I wouldn't recommend it. But I would take one of those parents from that pairing and breed it to a few different females or males, depending on what that snake is. Just spread it out and then pair back. So then it's not sibling to sibling directly by blood, where the parents are the same for all of them. It's spread out more, so
Be cool.
Yeah.
you're less likely to hit those offsprings that aren't going to make it or have severe deformities. That's still line breeding. You're still breeding that particular gene line, but you're spreading it out and then breeding it back to another one from a different project.
Yeah. I think, like, you spread them out as quickly as you can, right? Like, but does it, is line breeding absolutely happening? Yeah, 100%. Line breeding is happening.
They're only half related.
They're just second cousins. It's fine.
I am in Arkansas. It's all good by me.
Hey, I live very close to the border of Alabama.
TMI, dude.
An hour and a half away. I could be in Alabama in no time.
At my family reunions, we make my Uncle Charlie dress up like he's Chuck Woolery, and we do the match game.
Brought yourself in, sit yourself down. It's glad for I that you are to be seeing me today. You hear? Too far. Too far. I take it all back. I'm cutting that out of the YouTube video.
The biggest thing when it comes to line breeding is just making sure that you are bringing in genetic diversity and not just going back and continuing to breed to that line. Unfortunately, if there's not new genetics being added to the offspring at some point in the whole process, you are going to run into deformities, health issues, and the like.
Yeah. So a lot of the times when new morphs are being discovered, line breeding is happening because there might only be one snake that is showing that new morph. So, like, if we bring in one snake, whether it was from the wild or discovered in captivity, that say, let's go to Ozark's albino. Okay, they found an albino. And I don't know the whole history of the albino, I'm sorry, so I'm just going to go off of a made-up history here. They find one albino, they bring it into captivity, it survives living in captivity, they pair it to a normal. None of the babies are visually albino. At that point, they're going to grow those babies up, and they're going to breed them back to that albino snake, and then see if it reproduces. This is how new morphs generally come about. It's very rare that people are finding snakes. If they're collecting them from the wild, it's very rare that they find two albino snakes sitting next to each other that happen to be male and female, that they just bring in together to pair. Might they find a second one? Sure, but a lot of the times it's one snake coming in at a time.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, so pretty.
Look, Ozark, it's vicious. It's almost got me. It's going to size me up. Look.
I know, it's
I'm not
so
sure if you
vicious.
Want to explain what a partho clutch is, because people do get those sometimes.
Yeah. Do you want to cover Partho?
Huh?
Do you want to talk about it?
So,
No.
well, I don't want to talk about Partho, but I do want to talk about a new gene that I was talking about earlier, phenomenon, that is basically Partho clutches.
Okay.
So from my understanding, parthenogenics is when the mother never comes into contact with the male, but is still able to reproduce.
Yes.
And so they basically all end up being little clones of the mom. Most of the time, those babies don't make it, or are sterile. But it is a pretty cool phenomenon that can happen and does happen in snakes. Not super often, but definitely happens.
And
I
Um,
think it's more
who is
common
the
in geckos
master
than
of
it is snakes.
Arco? Who is the master? Morning geckos. How about that?
Morning geckos.
uh-huh.
I was gonna
Morning
say, yeah.
gecko. You get a bunch of morning geckos, you will have more morning geckos. Congratulations, your mom.
And you won't have a say in it.
Yeah.
Anthem mentioned.
they'll just start appearing.
Yeah, I'm not sure about
and then-
phenomenon either, BTO.
So yeah, so phenomenon is essentially a new gene that doubles the genetics on the parent that has it, right? So essentially, a friend of mine who was working with the gene, he had, I don't know genetics on ball python, so he had a mother with a certain slew of genetics, and he paired her to something completely different, and he had, I think she was a blue-eyed Lucy, and then she produced a bunch of blue-eyed Lucies, which shouldn't generally happen considering the male that she was paired with was completely different genetics-wise. But then in
You know what the
correlation,
male was, by chance?
I think he was like, and she like something, but basically those babies end up coming out het for the gene phenomenon. It's really complicated, and it's like something you have to really mess with. But I can have him, maybe come up one time or something and talk about it a little bit more. But basically, it's I'm not too sure about it, but it's basically like Partho clutches, and it's really interesting.
Okay.
And it actually would be like a very big progression in the ball python morphs, because you only need one parent essentially to be able to, produce what you're looking for.
But it would probably end up being, they'd probably end up being sterile, would be my guess, based on that. Because if it's reproducing multiple genes from the same animal and acting like Partho, do you know if Enchi showed up at all in there?
Yeah, it did.
Okay, so Enchi showed up.
What happened was he had a blue-eyed Lucy paired to an Enchi with a couple other genes, and the babies ended up being some were Lucy and some were Enchi, with the het for the phenomenon gene.
Okay.
It's very interesting, and it's really complicated.
Yeah, I have not heard of this before. So, because, my head would immediately go to, okay, so they're blue-eyed Lucy to an Enchi. The Enchi probably had something in the Bell complex, and which would result in some blue-eyed Lucys.
Exactly. And that's typically like your first thought, oh, well, that's why you got a certain thing. But no, that's not the case with phenomenon, and that's the point as to why it's such a weird gene and why it's called phenomenon in the first place.
Well, I, for one, will wait for that to be proved out a lot more than it is right now, because knowing my luck, I'll buy a $10,000 snake that's supposedly het for that, and it'll turn out to be the Kool-Aid trick all over again. And
yeah,
with the red ball
you'd have
pythons.
to talk to him, because there's a certain amount of people working with them, and the people who are working with them are able to explain it like very, very easily.
Well, he shed tested it for phenomenon.
Huh?
He shed tested it for phenomenon.
No, I think he proved it out.
Okay, so he proved it out, not shed tested. So
yeah, correct. But I'm not sure if other people that work with the gene have shed tested it.
I don't think I've seen that gene name on shed testing availability, but that doesn't mean that it's not out there. I wonder, if this is brand new, could it be a new gene in the Bell complex then?
That's true. Could be, but I'm not sure if the other people working with the gene are working with Bells. I know only he was, so.
Well, I know that it'll change the game as far as recessives are concerned, if that's actually what it's doing.
Yeah.
Because then you won't have to put, I mean, you could take that double het pied desert ghost with the phenomenon gene to a a normal and end up with all visual hides with desert and pied desert ghosts. If that's the case,
Yeah.
you
Okay,
skip a whole lot of steps.
so another question in that, I had a really good question. Now I completely forgot it. Someone interrupt me and let me just ADHD for a minute.
I do
I'm
that
sorry.
too.
No, you didn't interrupt me. I interrupted you, and I got stuck on ADHD brain.
Hey, I have ADHD brain too. It's bad.
Okay, so
That's
do you know if, okay, so say that it proves that the phenomenon gene is making stuff double, right?
Mhm.
And I'm not buying into that until a lot of stuff is proved out, but I'm interested
yeah, I need a lot
in
of
the
proof.
concept of it.
Yeah.
But so say it is. Do you know if all those babies came out male or all came out female?
No, they were a mix.
What's up, squirrel?
It was a mixture. I can send you his info too, and you can after this you can talk to him. He's pretty open about it, and he might be able to put you in contact with other people who work with the phenomenon gene, and they might be working with totally different genes. You know what I mean?
No, that would be super interesting. I'd be interested to hear more about it. Like I said, I'm going to be real hesitant on it because every time I get real,
Yeah.
something like that would worry me. Only
Yeah,
because-
it is. It's a different thing, and it's definitely something that's going to have to be played with a lot to prove, out. And he worked with a couple generations of it, and he just sold his entire phenomenon project, but he still, has the information of people who are working with it and who his project went to, and stuff like that too. So I can always put you in touch with him. And you
That's
can.
a good point.
ask
So,
him.
Life with Luke said something about babies would get 3 copies of a gene. So, not okay. They wouldn't necessarily, because even if so if they're allelic and they're all going to hang out on that same allele, they can't all exist together, right? So even if so even if mom passed on 2 copies of say lesser, and dad is lesser, and this phenomenon gene. This is just super nerdy, sciencey stuff that is not, none of this is proved out for anyone that's joining in. This is hypothetical conversation / interesting. But even if, we have a super lesser, we have a lesser, we paired them together, that partho gene somehow doubly produced the super lesser in the babies, we're not going to have super lessers. Because there's only 2 spaces on that allele unless something else happens, and then we're messing with genetics so much at that point that I don't even know what species we're getting.
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay. I don't know the answer, but let me just throw a wrinkle at that concept. What about high intensity orange dream or super, beyond super orange dream? There's a couple other lines like Chris Herndon and stuff works.
Yeah, I mean, there's so
They're
many
different
things
genes.
that you can do with it if it does end up being proved out, And I mean, like Midgard said, is that if it is in a certain complex too, that's really important. You know what I mean? I'm not sure, like I said, what the other people are working with, if they're also working with bells or things like that. But it would be interesting to see if it's just bells.
Yeah, because if it just proves out to be bells, then I'm going, okay, this is in the bell complex. Right? That's exactly where my mind would go. I'd go, this is bell complex all day, and we just haven't figured it out yet, which is fair. We're slow to figure stuff out. When clowns first came out, they didn't think that they were genetic, right? They thought it was just a random mutation.
Correct.
I think for the price of a phenomenon on Morph Market right now, I may buy one.
How much are they?
It's a lesser phenomenon het clown for $100.
Well, you
Is
got to
there
make
any
sure it's
phenomenon
actually
that doesn't have
phenomenon
lesser?
though, because I know the guy who I will put you in touch with. He knows the names of everyone working with true phenomenons. So,
but are they okay? Look on Morph Market since Ozark's there. Are all the phenomenons on there
in the bell
lesser or something in the bell complex?
No.
Okay.
No.
So there's some stuff that's not.
There's two that are for sale. KT Reptiles has got both of them. One is a lesser phenomenon het clown, and the other one is a phenomenon het clown. and you look at the phenomenon morph market page on the trait and look at the actual pattern that they've posted, and this phenomenon het clown looks almost identical to it.
Okay.
So
Interesting. Very interesting. I'm sure that this is going to prove out to be a problem at some point. That's going to be my prediction.
Yeah, probably.
Like,
I
this
mean,
is going to be a problem.
There's weird things in genetics everywhere, like rainbow boas. For me, there's some weird things, you know, that pop up, like what we call paradigm, which is a visual het.
Mm-hmm.
It's a visual double het. So, and then people look at that and they're like, what? A visual het? That doesn't make any sense. You know what I mean? But
I mean, I can show you something like that really quick. I know we're getting close. Did you just strike out at me, buddy? That wouldn't be a surprise.
Yeah, you know what, Rebecca? With you brought up a good point with the Brazilian rainbow boas that I've studied into a bit is that there's color patterns, right? And then there's line patterns. There's color morphs and pattern morphs, and if you spend big bucks on, like they are, on say a Picasso stripe or something, you could get two great a pair, a boy and a girl, really great ones, and then the babies may not even show it, or it would be an aberrancy, and it wouldn't be as clean as the parent you bought. It's not like ball pythons at all, and I don't know the answers, but I find it really interesting. Just like their version of pied isn't like a ball python pied, right? So
it's like two really, really good looking parents having ugly babies.
so that's a good question, Koala. What happens if you put the two double heads together? So for Colombian rainbow boas, it's not a morph, but it's called paradigm, and basically it's two double heads of any genes. And they produce a visual of only one of the genes. So basically, I have a het T negative, het T positive Colombian rainbow boa, and it is visual T positive. However, if I combined the T negative and T positive, that creates a completely new different gene, right? So, for example, anery to T negative is what's called a snow, and then it produces a totally different visual.
So something not quite the same as in boas, but kind of a interesting concept in ball pythons, okay? This is what we call a krypton, okay? So krypton is het clown and het cryptic. And krypton looks cryptic. I'll be honest, like we spend a lot of time trying to break them down to say what looks different. Is it krypton? Is it cryptic? They look very similar, realistically. So cryptic and clown are both recessive. You put them together, they're allelic with each other. They produce
They make a visual.
krypton. So they make a visual, even though technically she's het for both. And when you breed her, she will always pass on either a clown or a cryptic gene. She will not pass on both because it's still working on that one allele, right? So produces something different. Although I would argue that kryptons look very much like cryptics. But, you know, people can argue with me all day long on that. I still think they're a very useful thing to have in breeding.
And some hets do have visual markers. Albino, clown, and pieds, for just 3 examples, can have, not always, but can have visual markers on the normal that gives a clue to what it has.
G-stripe and tri-stripe too. I've been seeing some awesome animals that aren't even related to anything like G-stripe is the goal, but they'll have so-and-so. They'll be a fantastic, very expensive animal. It'll be 100% het G-stripe, and I've seen it a handful of times in recent months, and I'm thinking, why do these specimens look so freaking good? What is the het G-stripe doing? Like, what is it doing to make them pop that much harder? But I don't know the answer, but it's super interesting. And a G-stripe is nothing I like, but if it's going to be that awesome as a het, maybe I need to like it.
So this right here is my
when paired with the right things.
Yeah. So this right here is my het T negative, het T positive. but it's visual for the T positive. Well, not technically, but it looks like a T positive, but it's not. It's a het. And that's what paradigm is.
And so we have one person, and I know it's past 9. I'm going to start wrapping us up here in a minute. But so Koala in the comments. So if I put a het desert ghost to a het desert ghost, will you get a visual? You have a chance to get a visual. So it's roughly 25% chance on each egg to get a visual.
Yep.
So 1 in 4 chance.
If those are the only 2 genes or hets that are in the mix, the more hets you add, the more genes you add, the lower your percentage for everything goes.
Well,
But
at the
it's
same
still-
time, it's a roll of the dice.
Yes.
Yeah, so
You don't have control over what's actually going to happen.
Here's you
Yeah.
a het tri-stripe with strong visual marker. Like
We just put a het to a het, and we hit 4 visuals out of a 7-egg
What
clutch.
else is in that one?
Nice.
this is hypo het tri from
Okay.
Juggernaut.
Yeah, I'd say those
That's
are some
pretty.
strong visual markers.
Yep.
Just a little bit. Beautiful.
And he's got 2 matching girls to go to. One's related, one's not.
So it's like genie in a bottle. Someone said, yes.
But that's a het tri-stripe that shows some slamming characteristics.
Mm-hmm.
Het influence.
Yep. It's real. It's a real thing. It's not always
It
there,
absolutely
but it
is.
Well, just
Yeah,
because
when it's there. Would you
I
say
see that
Cheever? I
with
talked
Windy
over you.
City Morph. Juan, I love that guy's stuff. He is just, I mean, I am in awe of what he's doing. And he'll put up a photo. Here's so-and-so with the gene, and here's so-and-so with the het, with one of the recessives. Which do you like better? And I swear, half the time, I like the one with the het better, just using my eyes as a judge. It's kind of weird. Het influence is definitely real. It's not always there, but I think it's really cool. It just kind of goes, I guess, as repetition. Would you guys think? Just like enough saturation, and eventually starts to get, make sense.
And sometimes I think that comes from putting more quality into them. Like, I think, like, if you're choosing to produce with your highest quality animals, then you're producing babies that are higher quality, right? And over time, you're seeing different changes within them, and sometimes those het markers, I think. Huh?
Someone put a timestamp. It's actually 866.
Okay. Listen,
Jeez.
I'm gonna wrap us up because I do try to keep these to an hour, even though I got real into this like phenomenon conversation.
Circling back. Oh, sorry, Stacey.
Oh, go ahead, please circle back because
I know a lot of that there are people that are probably in the chat that are looking to get into breeding reptiles. And one thing I cannot stress is do your research, especially when it comes to the genetics. You can see something that's a beautiful animal on, say, Morph Market, and the breeder says it's one thing, and it's really something else. Like, for example, the phenomenon, we don't know whether the ones that are on Morph Market are true phenomenon genetics. It's a huge thing right now with bearded dragons. I keep having to circle back to it because, again, it's what I know. If you go in there, you'll see that there's generally a bunch of pied bearded dragons that are listed. I can almost guarantee you that 99% of those pieds aren't pieds.
Huh.
Unfortunately, there is something that's similar to the pied in the species. It's known as a paradigm. It's an incomplete expression of the trans gene, so they actually have spots where the color is very washed out, but there's still pattern underneath. Stuff like that, you really got to do your research, study the pictures of the animal that you're thinking about buying, make sure you know what you're getting so you're not getting ripped off.
Yep, exactly. Because same thing with my rainbow boa. I got it thinking it was a visual T positive. Come to think of it, it's not. It's a het T positive, het T negative paradigm. So you never know what you're getting. But you want to make sure, you know what I mean? You want to make sure you can shed test. There's other options. So you can shed test. You can prove out your genes. There's a bunch of different options as to what you can do.
So yeah, you guys brought up a good point. Someone here, Sweet Slytherin, says happens with Mandarin a lot. Mandarin is one gene that I would say you better know for damn sure who you're buying it from, because you can be snookered with a brassy orange dream, super orange dream, and not get your many thousands of dollars worth of Mandarin you paid for. Mm-hmm. And I see Tri-Stripe being called Tri-Stripe by sellers on Morph Market, when really you look at the pairing, if they're ballsy enough to actually show you the pairing, and you're like, it's a leopard, it's some kind of, is it leopard, super leopard spot? No, you guys might know. There's something you could do with leopard that isn't longitudinal stripes, but it ain't a tri-stripe gene, and people will sell them as such. You have to really know what you're looking at. Mandarin is another great point. And TKO Exotics, man, you brought up a good point on the Cresties. It happens everywhere with certain traits. I think because they're highly popular, so there's a sucker born every minute. You got to be careful.
Mm-hmm.
Oh, absolutely.
And I'm going to say, I know a lot of times you're going to hear people say, don't get into breeding, and all of those things. I actually love new people coming into the hobby, whether it's breeding or pet owning, whatever portion of the hobby you're looking to get into. I love that. And I think we should be more open to inviting people to join in the hobby and giving them the accurate information so that they can make smart decisions, right? But my only preface with that is going back to, this is a hobby with homework. If you cannot nerd out on this hobby and get real into learning your genetics and real into obsessing over odds and obsessing over temperatures and obsessing over feeding habits and all of those little things that go into it, then you're going to get real sick of this hobby real fast. Because this is one of those hobbies that takes a little bit of obsession. You notice that most of us are on here almost every day in one form or another talking about our animals. If you're not obsessed with it, then, maybe get a pet and love your one pet, but don't get into breeding unless you're willing to be obsessed.
Yeah, and if you're looking to get into breeding also, go back and watch the previous episode where we talked about breeding plans.
Mm-hmm. It's up on YouTube now.
I told my story in that, where when I first started out, I went from 0 to almost 200 snakes in less than 6 months. I was prepared for the care. I wasn't prepared for the cost. That's two different things. You're willing to make the sacrifice in time, but are you willing to make the sacrifice in your budget? Because 200 snakes takes a lot of money to care for. Also, I started wrong by buying a whole bunch of single genes. I'm going to do all these projects that are going to take 4 or 5 years and blah, 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 not knowing that there were shortcuts to this. You can if you buy the right animals, you can cut many, many steps out of a particular animal that you're trying to get to. So there's a lot of things, not just about care, but also about organization and how to determine where you want to go with this. Do you want to be a big breeder? Do you want to be just a small time breeder? Do you want to go to shows and sell? Do you want to just sell to local people? There's all kinds of different ways that you can do this. So you have to determine what you want to do right off the bat. Otherwise, you just waste time.
True that.
Yeah.
I got to
What Ozark said.
I gotta have a late dinner.
And I'm going to wrap us up as well. I swiped and made the
true,
comment.
Jen. God, I sure did. Jen's got it. That's very true.
Okay.
I actually took a shortcut here this week. I begged and pleaded a breeder in the U.S. in Florida, actually, for a Whip Blitz bearded dragon that's 50% red monster. My goal is to bump the percentage of red monster up to 75% with further lines, but I was looking at years to try to produce that animal.
There you go.
So I'm going to bring us kind of wrap stuff up now. So if you're in the comments, please go ahead and give everyone up in these boxes a follow. Everyone's working on different projects. Excellent breeders up here, all at different parts of their journey. And honestly, follows mean a lot to everyone. It really helps them and helps their business. And for them taking the time up here, I think definitely dropping a follow is worth it. I am going to get this episode up on YouTube in the next couple of days. I always aim for the next day, but it's usually a lie if I say I get it out by the next day. And next week's topic is still to be determined. I was actually kind of thinking of doing how to start hatchlings. So talking about getting hatchlings eating. But I'm going to kind of message with everyone and see where the level of interest is in that and go from there. Does that sound good?
Sounds fine to me.
Okay.
That was great.
Okay. I appreciate y'all being here so much. You have a good week, and I will catch you all later.